Welcome everyone to this week's podcast. Well, not only have I got a wonderful guest, but I've got a very dear friend who I met 25 years ago. We've just worked it out now, when I had not long started my business and had found and started to establish some training programs into the registered club industry. And over all these years, he's been a good friend and a good counsel when I've thought of ideas and just different projects. And it's wonderful that a client can be your client, but can also be your friend when you need to share ideas and discuss with what is happening in the industry. So this good friend of mine is Glenn Cushion, who's the amazing CEO at Ingleburn RSL. I'm going to give you just a little bit of an outline on Glenn's background before we get into quite a number of conversations and discussions and questions about his journey through the industry. So, as said, Glenn is currently the CEO at Ingleburn RSL Club and has been there since August 2011. In addition to his roles there, he's held senior roles including Executive Manager of Operations, Group Marketing Manager and Venue Manager in large clubs which have included Campbelltown Catholic Club, North Leagues Club, Bankstown Sports Club and Borkham Hill Sports Club. And he commenced in the club industry himself in November 1987. Now, let my memory serve me correctly, Glenn. You were a plumber before that, was that correct?
That's right.
Yes.
I was.
So let's start off with that question first, because here you are, a trainee, because we've always looked at the hospitality industry as one of those, second job or a transition job, but you're a plumber and you think to yourself, hey, what's going to make me money? What was that reason for you getting into this amazing industry?
Well, there is a story to that, Michelle, but let me say thank you for having me back. We did this a number of years ago, so
Yeah,
it's nice to be back.
it
Yeah,
is.
the story is a pretty simple one. It's true, I was working as a plumber, and I was not far off getting married at that particular time. So I thought it might be a good idea to get a second job to save for a house. It was no more complicated or sophisticated than that. Needed to save a deposit. So I thought, oh, what better way to have a second source of income? And it turned out to be a good decision.
Yes, yeah, and here you are, all these years later. And it's always interesting, isn't it? Here we are. We can talk about the last 25, 30 plus years in business and in the industry. But when you go back, when you're that young and as you said, you're saving for a house. Did you ever consider that here we would be in 2025? You're a CEO of a major RSL club that is doing significant things. We're going to be talking about the newly renovated and just reopened Ingleburn Bowling Club. Did you ever think, starting off just pouring a few beers, that this is where you would be today?
No, never.
And I always think that's what's interesting, because I think people start off in their careers and they go, well, I wonder what this is going to, where I'm going to be. But I think for the majority of us, it's a job and I'm enjoying it, so I'll stick around. But it's all about, well, what are we looking for? And is it the right group to be with it? Is it the right organization? Or is this the industry is wonderful, but we wish to, yes, step and go in different directions to meet other people. And that really what brings me to my first question is about the team. We can't do it alone, but of course, now with 6 generations of customers and 4 generations in our workplace, there are challenges, but they're not all those challenges of, oh, woe and despair. To me, they're challenges that are exciting, that inspire, that get us to think differently because we have that diversity of thought. So the industry has always been seen as that second job or that university, stopgap measure. However, you have built this amazing career. Can you share with us why you joined the hospitality industry and what was your first job in the industry? So you've said, yep, you were wanting to save money for a house, but what was that first job and how did you progress? Was it rather quickly or, yeah, what was it? How did it happen?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Michelle. My first job was at Bankstown Sports Club, and a word you used a moment ago was enjoyable. I really enjoyed the space, and had a good time whilst I was working there. I'm sure back in those days, I was probably one of those challenging and puzzling generational types that had come into the business, but you adapt. But I think the key word is opportunity and identifying an opportunity, and that's a very personal thing.
Mm,
And I was fortunate enough to be able to identify that as an opportunity for me and a space that I enjoyed being in, and I enjoyed those around me, and
mm,
hopefully some of those around me enjoyed me being around them. But
yeah.
I was provided an opportunity whilst I was still casual to become a casual supervisor.
Mm,
And what that role at the time allowed me to do was mingle and converse with patrons. So basically, it was, I suppose, a very early version of a customer service officer,
yes.
whereby it was almost a reconnaissance mission to garner feedback from members in the club and convey that information back to the club and how we might improve our offering, our service, and our
Mm.
engagement. So it was a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? We can ask people to fill out survey forms or do feedback, but it is actually walking around, having that conversation with them and finding out what's working, but also maybe even things that we didn't even think of, but are just making an impact on them so positively. And places like Bankstown, which are huge, got a massive footprint on the land. It is finding out, those little nuances that people go, oh, yes, just having that seat there or just having that ability to have that space to talk to somebody, it makes such a difference. So I love that first role of being that customer service person, because we do need to speak to our patrons.
That was after I had been a cashier and a poker machine attendant and bar training, and also worked on the door and reception. Yeah, there were plenty of opportunities that I was able to be involved in.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's the thing is the opportunities, and we hear a lot about that, don't we, now, Glenn, with Gen Z. They come into the role and they really feel like, okay, I can be CEO, or thereabouts in a very short period of time. And they could well be. However, we know there's a lot of learning steps, but it's more the fact of we need to show them that there is a career path or there are opportunities to grow. They are not going to wait around for 10 years till somebody falls off the perch or retires to get that next step. And so did you find that people were tapping you on the shoulder back then, Glenn, going, I think we'd like to put you in this role?
Oh, look, there's no doubt there were opportunities provided, but just to go back to that generational aspiration that you mentioned a moment ago, that's code for impatience. And I think a key attribute to any person, really in any workplace, is patience
Mm.
and persistence and willing to learn
Yes.
and take advantage of an opportunity that may be before you and be grateful for the opportunity.
Yes, yeah. Look, you're right. Yes, patience is a virtue, isn't it? And there's a
Indeed.
not all those seen, but we do need that. And that probably flows in beautifully to my second question about giving someone who's looking at starting a career in the hospitality industry and in particular the registered club industries today, because we'll always have that transient group of people that will be coming through and then move on, but it's really calling out to everybody going, this is a great opportunity to have a fantastic career. Going into the schools, going into those programs where they can learn so much more about it. Do you have any tips about how they should approach going, apart from just taking the resume in and dropping off the front door and just, crossing the fingers that it may get past the person on reception? Have you got any tips that you might?
Oh, I think the first comment I'd like to make there is to give consideration as to your employment metrics, what you're looking for when
Mm,
you're employing somebody. And what we're trying to do here at Ingleburn is hire for culture, hire
mm,
based on our values, our behaviours, and our purpose.
mm.
And if there is an alignment with an individual who walks in with that resume or applies online, I think you're a chance.
Mm,
and then provide opportunities. So I think it's important to promote a learning and development environment as much as you can and as much as you can afford.
mm.
Create that opportunity and demonstrate to people or to your employees that there is an opportunity to grow, develop, and carve out a career in
Yes.
hospitality because it's a wonderful space and there are
Yes.
wonderful opportunities. And
Mm.
there are many people who have, as you said earlier, started picking up glasses and ended up in very senior positions.
Yes, yeah. And you are right. It is about the culture, Glenn, and it was probably something that even when you went for your first job back in those days, and even myself, culture wasn't used. It was, this is the job. And it's as simple as that. But we've found and we've learned, both being as leaders as well as frontline people, that culture is key and it is having that vision and sharing those values and modeling those behaviors for those values, which really, do you feel that people should, instead of just saying, well, oh, well, that's the closest place, I'm just going to put my resume in, actually look at what their own values are and are they congruent with Ingleburn RSL?
Oh, look, absolutely. And we encourage them to have a look at our website, have a look at our values, our purpose, our vision, and just understand a little bit more about us. And
Yes.
it's more than just somewhere for someone to pull a beer or pick up a
Mm.
glass. There is a reason.
Yes. Yes,
Mm.
there are. And it's getting them to understand that when they find that congruency, how much joy they're going to bring in and being grateful for having that opportunity and being part of a really strong supportive team.
Absolutely.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, I used to work with a HR manager, and she always said, if you enjoy what you're doing, you don't work a day in your life.
No. Mm.
So, and I think there is some substance in that. And look, as an individual, you need to work out what is right for you, where
Yes.
you want to be.
Mm.
And again, I'll go back to that word opportunity. If you can spot in the distance that there may be an opportunity, put in place a plan and goals, how you might exceed and
Mm.
fulfill that
Yes.
opportunity that is before you.
Mm. And as you've rightly said, we've got all these multiple generations. How are we engaging the new ones? Because you're as lovely as you've got a very good solid team there for a number of years there at Ingleburn, but there's all those new people come in, and now particularly with the bowling club now being reopened. How do you keep those that are already there? Because we hear that, oh well, we can attract them, but how do we retain them? So how do you continue to engage your team, no matter whether they've been there for many, many years or somebody new?
Look, I don't think there's one specific direction that will achieve that, but certainly multi-skilling the
Mm-hmm.
staff and giving them the opportunity to learn as much as they're willing to learn, or
Mm.
that they have the capacity and ability to learn and function and flourish in variety of shifts and areas
Yes.
in the workplace. But look, I think what's as equally important is that part of the culture is whether it's me as CEO or the senior leadership team or indeed the managers, just talk to them, treat them like people, ask them how they are,
Yes.
engage them in conversation. I'm not suggesting you cross the line into any personal space, but it's not hard and it doesn't take a lot of energy to say, hello, how you going, or how are things?
Yeah.
Mm,
And it makes such a difference,
I
doesn't
think
it?
so. Yeah.
Oh, we've seen, both of us have seen over the years and experienced where there'll be CEOs that don't even know who their frontline team are, and the frontline team go, I don't know who they are, they've got the photo at the front door, and that's all they see of them, because there's that real disconnect, and it doesn't build trust and it doesn't build loyalty. And I've been in and out of all your clubs over the years, Glenn. That's one thing, be walking through, and the staff, they'll be saying that hand up hello, and then you'll be saying hello to them as well as to patrons, and it just builds that you are being seen, you are being heard, and I care for you. The leadership team care for you, and we want to hear from you. So that's that part of that engagement fulfillment. Do you think building that trust, they become more loyal to you as well as being as an employee?
There's no doubt that some do. So
Mm.
that allows a path of connection with
Yes.
some more than others. But as you alluded to earlier in the conversation, there is a transient element of
Mm,
our workplace. So people are here for a specific period of time, perhaps while they study, or
mm,
in my case, it may be a second job where you have a goal that you're saving for. When you achieve that goal, it might be time to move on and do something else.
mm.
But like, I believe it is just not one element of the engagement with your employees. It's a host of undertakings that
Mm.
you strive to achieve to build that relationship for the goal of a long-term employment relationship.
Yes, yeah. And it would be lovely to think everybody will just stay in the same job for all the times. But then I think to myself, oh, sometimes you just get people sitting in a job just sucking oxygen. You really don't want them to be there forever.
Well, there's inherent issues with that as well, as we all know.
And then somebody, I've always said, if you get 2 really good years out of somebody who really wants to be there and they've left because, they've finished university or they're traveling overseas or for whatever the myriad of reasons are, wow, weren't those 2 years fantastic? And then if they ever do come back, the doors always open for them. But oh, they feel if we've given people an opportunity, in our industry to understand all the quirks of people's personalities that come through our doors. What a wonderful foundation it is for them to have a career in any other organization and industry, because this is that one industry that we see people who can be really lovely and happy and smiling at 10 o'clock in the morning and could be very different later on in the day. So how do they handle that? It's certainly a wonderful it's a wonderful vocation where you get to see everything fantastic about the human race as well as some parts where you go, oh, doesn't it?
Well, you do get to see that on both sides of the counters, don't you, with the team and also the patrons. But just to continue on from what you were mentioning a moment ago about, when that time does arise where someone moves on,
Mm,
if they can move on as an advocate for your business
yes.
and your culture, and they tell one person who happens to be a local or who happens to be looking for a position, if they can come into your business or engage initially with your business in a positive frame of mind because an
Mm,
advocate's been out there, I think
yes.
that's an achievement in itself as well.
Yeah. Look, definitely. And we want to create that workplace of choice, don't we? We don't
Mm,
want to be
mm,
feeling that, well, they've just applied for the job because it's the one that's closest to home, or it's the last it's the last place that I've tried and nobody else has wanted me.
mm.
Mm,
Well, as you know, we've undertaken a lot of work in the learning and development space and the
mm,
culture space. And one of the outcomes after we walked through and established and built as a team our culture, our behaviours, the shadow behaviours, our purpose, our vision was to develop and have a documented, living, breathing EVP, an employee value proposition. So that's something that we were able to achieve. And
mm,
again, that's a document that is in place and that is something that we share with anyone who is interested to see that, but particularly prospective employees and
mm.
the reasons why.
Yes,
Mm,
yeah, which is beautiful because it's not just a document that's been written and then we go, okay, we've
mm,
done that, tick that off,
yeah,
it sits in a folder somewhere or it's in the employee
yeah,
handbook that they
yeah.
read once. Look, I've known you for so many years, and I know many of our listeners are in our industry, so they would know of you as well, Glenn, because you are one of those stalwarts in our industry. But can you give our listeners just a little bit of an overview of what is Ingleburn RSL Club? What does it stand for? Tell us a little bit about, the team that you've got there. And of course, now with the reopening of Ingleburn Bowling Club, and that was a club that, typical bowling club that had, a certain group of pre-veterans that would play their bowls, and there's always that saying, greens don't make you money, but it's more than that. It's that connection with community, and now how you've really just reopened this amazing club. And I'd love you to share a little bit of history about the clubs with my audience, please.
Sure. So starting with Ingleburn RSL Club, the suburb of Ingleburn, the Council of Campbelltown, the Macarthur region of Sydney. We have some 18,000 members, 94 employees. A typical club offering being food, beverage, entertainment, activities. We also have a children's pay for play centre,
Mhm.
Tabatinga. But what is interesting about Ingleburn RSL Club at the moment, and I will move on to the bowling club in a moment, which has been all but completely rebuilt. On the 7th of June, so in a few days' time, the club has operated here at Chester Road for 50 years.
Wow,
And
gosh.
that comes with the challenges of a building that is 50 years old. So
Mm,
the focus of the board at this point in time is master planning for the site, and the decision has been made to work towards building a new club on the site. So hopefully in the next few years we can realise that aspiration and
mm,
build a new club on the site, move out of the old club, eventually knock it down, and then realise the potential of the site here at Ingleburn. Ingleburn RSL Club is also a very traditional RSL club.
mm,
We have an active and engaged sub-branch that we work very closely with, and I can pleasingly say we have a wonderful relationship with our sub-branch, and they do some fantastic work in their space, and
mm,
I often watch in admiration. I think they're a very, very well run and administered sub branch, and
mm.
they can certainly hold their heads high in that RSL space.
Yeah, which is so
Uh,
very important.
indeed. Ingleburn Bowling Club, as you mentioned, it has been refurbished and rebuilt.
Mm,
It opened in originally in 1954, so it is 71 years old
mm,
as we speak, and it has served the community, particularly in the sport of lawn bowls
hmm.
and social recreation activity for that time. We amalgamated with Ingleburn Bowling Club, and that amalgamation was completed in November 2020, so almost 5 years ago.
Gosh.
And of course, during 2020, while we were negotiating and running through the process of amalgamation, that was stalled because of the COVID pandemic.
Mm,
As I say, the amalgamation was completed in November 2020, and then 2021, of course, we were closed for another 16 weeks
mm,
because of the pandemic. But what was evident with Ingleburn Bowling Club that it was a aging and
mm,
rundown facility, and it wasn't there wasn't an option just to patch and paint it. It certainly required some significantly higher level of investment than a patch and a paint, so to
mm,
speak. But look, too, with a credit and my admiration to the board of directors at Ingleburn RSL Club, the board committed to a minimum 10 years trade and $6 million spend over that period. Mind you, the project just completed cost considerably more
yes.
than $6 million, but it was the right amalgamation to take place, and it was the
Mm,
right decision and right outcome for the community and the members of our clubs. So 2022 into 2023, the board ran through the process of planning, consideration, consultation with stakeholders, council DA application, and approximately September 23, the DA was approved, and then the staging considerations were
mm,
undertaken after a rigorous tender process. And what happened after many versions of how that project might be staged. The decision was made to close it as of the beginning of January 2024, with a
mm,
view for an 11-month project. That didn't turn out to be the case. It ended up being just on 16 months,
mm,
and a original $12.5 million project has completed at just over $16 million
mm.
because of circumstances essentially beyond our control, being latent conditions and
Yes.
unforeseen site and building circumstances. But that happens, and
Mm.
I'll just add to that the board and the club, we have no regrets, and it's turned out to be an amazing facility for the
Yes.
community.
Yeah, and I hear so much about that. And, you know, once again, it may be as a bowling club, but it is for the whole community. And it's bringing in so many other generations that haven't been into the club before. And I can't wait to experience it myself. You know, I've been floating around, you know, here, there, and everywhere over the last few weeks since the grand opening. But I'm, you know, just reading from social media reports, you know, and congratulations to you and the board, because always it's a big decision to close a venue that people are coming to and then say to them, hey, believe in us. It's going to be the next 16 months. And then, of course, as you said, looking at the new master plan for Ingleburn RSL Club, it will be wonderful to see that. I remember I may have just been sneaking in under 18 at the time, getting in and watching the bands because I grew up not far away from Ingleburn on my parents' turkey farm. And wow, they had some great bands. So if you're in my generation, we had My Sex and quite a few other Mental as Anything and a few and Ted Mallory Gang back in those early days. And it was the place to go because it was something new and interesting and had that space for it. And it's interesting over time where you've had these auditoriums for functions, and as you've said now with Tabatinga there, how you know the club has had to evolve with the age groups and the demographics of the people coming through, which is wonderful to see.
Oh, look, it is. But Michelle, I'll just say to you, some of the bands you've just mentioned, then I'm sure there'll be some in the audience of this podcast that might need to Google the name of those bands to find out who they are.
Hey, they were really good bands. There was quite a few more, but
Mm, mm,
yeah, as you said, they probably will have to Google them. But they were
mm.
very strong Aussie bands that made a difference, and that's where many of them had their first opportunities was in places like Ingleburn RSL, and they gave them that break.
Oh, look, the club industry as a whole is a
Mm,
tremendous supporter in sections for the entertainment industry. And if it
yes.
wasn't for the clubs, there would be a lot less work for entertainers. And I think it's a
Mm.
really important part of the offering to provide for our community with entertainment in our clubs. And I'm, glad that a lot of clubs do that.
Yes, yeah. Glenn, you mentioned, you know, about your sub branch being a very strong and a very thoughtful and a very much an inspiring sub branch to others that,
Mm.
you know, work well together and between the sub branch and then naturally yourselves, the RSL clubs. And now I'd like to ask you a question about that because as a CEO of an RSL club, how do you balance that club's commitment to both veterans with its role in supporting the broader local community because you know you do go under this banner of the Returned Servicemen's League. How do you balance that between veterans and your broader community?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's a brand strength of our club to be known as an RSL club. I
Mm,
think the overwhelming majority of members of our community, whether or not they frequent our club, whether or not they're members of our club, they would have heard of or know of the
yeah.
RSL club. And there's no doubt there is a connection there. I think it's important that clubs, particularly RSL clubs, where they can support their sub branches and veterans.
Mm,
In our case, I mentioned the health of the relationship between our
mm,
club and the sub branch, and indeed over the years when they've come to us with particular projects that require funding, whether that's a direct donation or financial support from the club, or whether or not it's through club grants,
mm,
we've always been more than happy to entertain, facilitate, and effect that. Our club will look for veteran projects to fund and support where we can after they have gone through a rigorous and considered assessment process.
mm,
The board of Ingleburn RSL Club support me. I'm on the board of the RSL Services Clubs Association. I'm also on the board of the Veterans Benevolent Fund, and the Veterans Benevolent Fund supports a broad range of
yes.
very specific veteran programs and veteran charities,
Mm,
and they do a wonderful job in that space. If there are RSL or veteran events whereby any of our staff can attend, our board attend. We'll support those where we can as well.
Yes, yeah,
Mm,
which is important because
mm,
um, it's very easy to just brush it aside or change the name. But as
mm,
you're saying, it's a brand that has whole strength and is
mm,
important to
mm,
not
mm,
only to veterans and the community,
mm,
but
mm,
it's part of our makeup
mm,
of our
mm.
society as being Australians, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, I'm a strong advocate
Mm,
in saying that clubs that carry the name or the initials RSL and engage with their veterans, their sub branches,
mm,
and the broader veteran community,
mm,
that's an attribute that assists, that aligns with the RSL, and the contribution of veterans over the years should never be
mm.
forgotten.
No, it shouldn't be. So thank you for touching on that. I really appreciate it, Glenn. So, what are the biggest changes you've seen in the club industry in the last 5 years? Beforehand, we used to talk about 10, 15 years, but after that bit of a blimp back in 2020, we realize now things are changing so more rapidly. And we're seeing that more and more today with the
Mm.
introduction of AI and just a whole lot of tools and resources. So, yeah, have you seen as the biggest changes in those past 5 years?
Oh, yeah. Look, Michelle, we could probably do an entire podcast
Yes.
or discussion just on that, but essentially you touched on one that I would have mentioned, and I think what is sweeping the desktop of all team members is AI and the
Yes.
opportunities with AI. There's definitely the regulatory space,
Mm,
the compliance that just increases that burden of regulation and compliance. And look, that's not such a bad thing.
mm.
We want to be the best and most responsible providers we can be. We have an incredible social license to do what we do,
Yes.
and with that comes responsibility. But the pace of change in that space, as I say, the AI, the generational
Mm,
expectation, which we touched on before, when you combined those three areas, and there are many, many more. I mean, there's federal government legislation that
mm.
we deal with all the time, particularly in the fair work space. There's state-based legislation. There's challenges with development applications with
Yes.
councils. There's banking and finance responsibilities, ASIC responsibilities. And I just list those to answer the question.
Mm,
Certainly not complaining about it. It is what it is. And
mm,
I always bring it back to and remember and not lose sight of the fact of, we have a gift in the social license that we have. And
mm.
as I say, with that comes the responsibility.
It certainly does. So where do you see the industry in 10 years? Because it has changed so much in the last five. I think it was for many venues, it gave them an opportunity, even though it was hard when we were shut down, to
Mm,
really look back at seeing, well, what do we do? Are we just doing it because it's just same old, same old?
mm,
And then really start to think, well, what else can we offer? What else can we introduce? What else, how else can we change things and what challenges?
mm.
So where do you see the next 10 years, Glenn?
Oh, look, I think it'll be a better industry than it is
Mm,
now. I'm very optimistic and positive about the future of the industry because I'm fortunate enough to call a lot of very good people in the industry my friends, and I
mm,
know their attitude, I know their approach,
yes.
I know their aspirations for their clubs and their team members and
Mm,
their communities, and I think the rock, the platform, the footings for our industry is that basic human need to
mm,
socialize, for
yes.
humans to
Yes.
be in company with each other. And
Mm.
what better place than your local club?
It is, and it's so true. We saw that when, the doors reopened, people were just knocking on the doors just to get back, just to talk to people, to have that
Yes, yes,
connection.
yeah.
And, I know there are still some people that, choose or have that choice to work from home or to come into the workplace. And so now we're seeing the gathering back again at coffee shops or coming back into the workplace. And we've got Zoom, but nothing beats that face-to-face discussion. It breaks down all those myths about intergenerational things because you're actually getting to talk to people, and it's just sitting around, whether it's over a cold beverage or a cup of tea, for to connect with people, because loneliness is everywhere, and it's very, very hard for people.
Oh, look, and we're a solution for loneliness
Yes.
and something I'm very passionate about, not only individual loneliness, but also couple loneliness.
Mm,
So you may have an older couple who live local and they have for many years. Their children have grown up and they probably have
mm,
grandchildren, and some of them even have great grandchildren. And what inevitably happens is that they move away.
yes.
And their friends, their social connection, in many cases, is at our clubs. And I
Mm,
often say, despite our best efforts, if we're at home with our husband or our wife or our partner, there's probably occasions during the day where you do run out of things to say to each other.
yes.
And, you walk into your local club and
Mm,
see a familiar face. And what is a great opportunity and brings me joy every time I see it is when I see the staff, particularly the younger staff,
mm.
engaging with the older patrons. It's
Yes.
magic.
It
Yeah.
is. It is because,
Mm,
and you're right. A lot of the families will move away, whether that's by choice or whether it's for
mm,
work, or just
mm,
be able to afford somewhere to live, because the cost
mm.
of housing is just ridiculous. And I've
Yeah.
always say to team members, for many of them that come here, our community, it's an extension to the lounge room, and you are the family. And so
Yeah.
they do
Yeah.
share with you, but they also just want to be, hear a little bit about you as well, so they can make that connection, and as you walk in the door, and have that raised eyebrow and that nice smile, and welcome you back, because everybody wants to feel like they belong somewhere.
Oh, look, they do. And we've always encouraged the team when someone walks into the club, just
Mm.
make an effort to say hello to them.
Yes. Yes.
And as importantly, and I think you've always measured this, giving them or rendering that farewell when they
Yes.
leave the club. And this certainly isn't my description or my analogy of it, but give them the KGB, the kiss goodbye.
It makes a
Well,
big
it's
difference.
yeah, look, it's the last impression, and
Yes.
again, whenever you can create an advocate for your business, I
Mm.
think you've had a win, and it's a gift to be able to create an experience.
Yes, it is.
Mm.
So, two last questions. One is, what has been your biggest challenge throughout your career in the registered club industry? And then the second question is, what has been your greatest achievement, Glenn?
Well, one probably flows into the other,
Mm.
and whilst it is a physical challenge in terms of when I started work here at Ingleburn RSL Club, and if the truth be known, I didn't know a lot about RSL clubs. I didn't know anything about sub branches. I had no idea what the connection was between the sub branch and the club. But as you do in that situation, you learn very quickly.
Mm.
And
Yes.
also at that time, I learned very quickly that we're a tenant. So the
Mm.
owner of this club and this club site was the sub branch. And the story was at the time, well, I naturally thought, well, obviously the goal is that the number one goal is to attempt to buy the building off the
Yes.
sub branch.
Mm.
There were many around the table that said to me that won't happen, they'll never sell. But fortunately, we were able to work with the sub branch over many years. So you talk
Mm.
about challenge. It was a multiple years, I should say,
Yes.
journey to achieve sale. So ironically, the sale settled in September 2020.
Mm.
And we completed the amalgamation with Ingleburn Bowling Club in November 2020.
Mm.
And just a very quick backstory, part of the strategy to have some leverage with the Ingleburn RSL sub-branch was to amalgamate earlier with Ingleburn Bowling Club because that property was freehold,
Right.
and not that it would have made, I suppose, any difference in the long run, but had we have had that leverage whereby we had a property or a club property that we own, that may have given us a little
Mm.
more sway in the negotiations. But in the end, we achieved both objectives, but not necessarily in the order or the timeline that we set out to do so. So that was a challenge. But look, like all other CEOs, you get into a business and you set a strategy, you set goals, and you work towards achieving them. So I think they all make up part of the challenge, and hopefully those challenges end in satisfaction. And
Yeah.
I suppose we would have to score the purchasing of the property from the sub branch because it doesn't happen very often in our
Yes.
space. It is complex, and that complexity is underpinned by an unmotivated vendor. Typically, the sub branch, they don't have to sell.
Yes.
There's no haste or no pressure for them to sell, make decisions, and deliver outcomes because at the end of the day, the purchase price that you pay, the price that you pay, ends up in a bank account, and
Mm.
so it's not to the benefit of an individual or a small
Yes.
group
Mm.
of people. So that was tremendously satisfying. But look, so was the amalgamation with Ingleburn Bowling Club because that had its inherent challenges
Mm.
prior to, through the amalgamation, as I spoke about earlier, just after the amalgamation with the pandemic, and then the challenges with the building. And as I said, it wasn't a patch and paint
No.
opportunity. But I just add as well, tremendously satisfying was our culture journey as well, where we were able to, all of us, me included, was not be in a space where we're unsafe, but put ourselves in a space where we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's where that growth has nurtured and built those values, those behaviours, the purpose, the vision, the employee value proposition, which we, the best we can, still
Yes.
adhere to today. So it's
Yeah.
been a wonderful ride.
It has been. And look, I'd like to thank you so much, Glenn, for joining with us and sharing with myself and my listeners your own personal journey, starting off with that very first job to where you are today and, building your team, your management team, and the connection that they have with each other and the community. There are many people listening to this that may well be in a role of a manager or a frontline person, or perhaps they're another CEO. Have you got a tip for them when it comes down to connection and that resilience piece of being a CEO?
Yeah, look, I think connection is as important as any other element of your being.
Mm.
So, work to build up a network. Don't be frightened to pick up the phone to the majority of CEOs I know, even if you don't know them, they'll take your phone call, they'll have a cup of coffee with them, start to build a network, get a WhatsApp group going, and realize that you're not alone because look, the reality is when you're working in a senior management position, there's always the CEO's door that you can go and knock on. But when
Yes.
you do become the CEO, if you knock on the board's door too much, they might start to question whether or not you know what you're doing.
Yeah,
So,
that is
so
true.
your network and your colleagues
Mm.
are invaluable. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's what's very important. It's that we can't do it alone. And it gives people pleasure if they can help you and it gives you the opportunity to perhaps even share your ideas as well. It's that give and take which makes it just that beautiful part of humanity and that connection to community. Is there something that I haven't asked you that you would like to share about the registered club industry?
Oh, look, I think we've covered a broad range of issues and my views, but look, I wouldn't hesitate to say to any aspiring person in the industry or anyone looking for an opportunity to carve out the career, give some thoughts to hospitality, the registered clubs. I mean, the excitement of the technology that is before us now or that will come,
Yes.
particularly in the tap and go and the cashless space.
Mm.
I think it augurs for a very, very fruitful and prosperous future. And as I said before, I have no doubt will be a better industry in years to come.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Glenn, for once again for joining me, and I look forward to catching up again in the future.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.